The Mag 7 are now in official correction territory, down 10% from October highs. All the SaaS providers like Salesforce, ServiceNow are 25% off year to date, and service software or software ETF is down 20%. So we're watching the greatest infrastructure build out since electricity and the most expensive game of musical chairs in history. Ads, I'm going to start with you on this one. Shall we start with Nvidia's GTC?
I think that's a great place to start. It is one of the most important set-piece tech events of the year. Now, last month in February, Jensen Huang, he told the Korean Economic Daily that we'll bring out a chip that will surprise the world. Why did he tell them that? Well, that's because right now the most constrained things in this world of constraints is memory chips, and many of the memory chips get made by Samsung and SK Hynix in Korea. So that's an important place. That's where Jensen went. He spoke with people and with the journalists, and he said, we're going to bring some cool stuff out. He didn't bring one thing out this week. He brought out 3 cool chip announcements. The first one was the thing that came out of their acquisition of Grok. Grok they acquired for $20 billion a few months ago, and they're going to bring out the Grok 3 LPU, which is an inference chip. And when you look at the performance on a token per watt basis, so as we know, power is this massive constraint we have, and so you really try and figure out how can you maximize the amount of tokens you can generate with the power you have in these data centers. Well, it generates 35 times as many tokens per watt as a GPU-only basis. That should ship from Q3 this year. It was a nice big announcement. He's also announced the Vera Rubin GPU. So that's the next generation of the sort of classical NVIDIA workhorse, the models we can use for kind of chips we can use for both training and inference, and that the GPU will be 10 times as performant per watt as Blackwell, which is the current state of the art, 5 times on performance, 10 times lower cost per token, and so that's seen as a major jump. I mean, you think about it, there's some places in the world where we think, oh gosh, if you can improve 10, 20, 30% a year, that's pretty good. If you can double, that's phenomenal. We're talking about a 10x from chip generation.
It's not marginal stuff, is it? This is no. These are big leaps.
These are massive leaps. And of course, that feeds into all the stuff we're talking about with CapEx and what happens there. Because if you've got a ton of expensive kit you bought last year and you're still writing that off and you get new kit coming out this year that's 10 times as performant, well, what does that do to the economics?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the third thing, just to round that off, is the Feynman chip, the sort of 2028 generation. And it feels like that's a little bit further out, but it's quite exciting because it's going to be the first sub-2 nanometer chip produced. TSMC is making it. They're talking about stacking the chips in a 3D way. So you're going to have a kind of silicon on top of silicon. You're going to have 8 times the rack density of Rubin. So you can cram a lot more stuff into the same amount of space. Again, we know the data centers are all the premium right now. So stacking much more into the same amount of space, making those same chips much more performant. We're really seeing a dramatic improvement in the performance here.
Incredible. Like, actually, I mean, this is kind of NVIDIA's now looking in the inference territory.
No, I don't think. I just think just when people, no, I mean, not people in the industry, but perhaps outsiders were wondering where the peak was for NVIDIA. Jensen pulls out, and shows a very, very clear, compelling roadmap for the future and for the business, predicting what 1 trillion revenue or 1 trillion purchase orders in 2027.
Yeah,
in a way, just when it's not, I wouldn't call it a rabbit out of the hat moment because it's clearly not, a surprise in that sense. But it's certainly.
Well, they were booking 500. They were booking 500 bill, weren't they? So they basically doubled their outlook. Is my assumption.
Yeah. So they keep they have a, NVIDIA, the current generation of LLMs have been trained on the backbone of NVIDIA, and AI going forwards will be run on the backbone of NVIDIA in the real world, in context of inference. So, hats off to these guys. One, definitely not sideshow, but other thing that perhaps Mads didn't touch on is the NVIDIA and Star Cloud announcement. So we like Star Cloud in this pod, I think, at least I do, because the founder, Philip, is an English dude. and he's building something that's probably a very un-European, which is something very or historically un-European, which is clearly a massive big swing kind of moonshot company, which is putting data centers in space and has generated. I think
Jensen used his video to kick off, didn't he?
Exactly, which is, I think it's amazing. But remember, by the way, StarCloud is basically a seed stage startup. Right? I think there's probably a big round to happen that hasn't been announced yet, but you know what I mean. Like, this company is very young. Philip only started posting on socials about 9 months.
Did he know? Do you think? Well, I mean, did he know that it was going to be used at the beginning of the conference? And what an amazing thing if you're watching it and then all of a sudden your video comes on the screen.
I think he had the inside track.
I'm assuming they did.
I mean, some of the friends of ours were early into that. I think it was a Y Combinator company. Some of our friends invested early in that company. A lot of our friends passed on that company because they thought it was batshit crazy. Which
moonshots, baby. Literal moonshots.
But interestingly, look, he's now being taken very seriously. I think it probably helps that Elon has now made this as a central proposition of the SpaceX story going forwards, or at least it was a convenient narrative under which to roll XAI underperforming into SpaceX. But still, sorry, just going back to the substance of this, the announcement is around unveiling a space optimized version of the Vera Rubin AI platform. So the data centers in space narrative or story is around inference. It's not around training, right? So clearly, we have a lot of announcements and push towards inference at Nvidia. This is effectively an adjunct to that. So exciting times indeed. I mean, how many companies that are that young get their name up in lights alongside the top, 3 whatever company in the world, and one of the big, at their marquee conference. So I think it's we will see lots of startups get their name on that frigging thing in New York, right? Which the NASDAQ thing, or whatever it is. But this is an impressive thing. So
Mads, anything else that you'd pick up on here before we move on?
Yeah, come on, guys. Let's see more of it.
Fabulous.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's a lovely story. I'm still not sold on data centers in space, but who cares? It's a lovely story, and we're going to see what happens.
Well, I mean, I think just worth stopping up and just reflecting on the meteoric rise of Nvidia. And the question on everybody's lips is, of course, this has been the bellwether of this bull AI market. Can it continue? For how long can it continue? And what Jensen is saying, look, we are no longer just a GPU company or a chip company. We're a platform company. We've got 5 layers to our business. We've got the chips. We've got the networking. We've got the models. We are also looking at energy, and we're looking at applications. It's a full stack. And that 5-layer cake is what he's saying is what's going to present us with the opportunity as a business to keep growing into the future, keep growing earnings, and therefore NVIDIA will remain a good investment. And if you try and unpack those 5 layers a little bit, well, he's certainly got the chips. We've got more than $200 billion in annual run rate revenue now, growing very fast. He's also got networking. There was the Mellanox acquisition. That's delivering more than $10 billion per quarter in revenue now. It's a massive business. He's got the model side where there's sort of an Android play. They've got the Nemotron coalition. They're working with Mistral and others on models. That's less of a monetizable part of the business right now and looks more like something that can drive hardware revenue. On the energy side, he's building reference architecture for data centers to make them energy efficient. And they have been investing in energy generation, but again, it's a rounding error in the business right now. And then there's the whole application side, which again looks mostly like it's driving GPU sales. So if you unpack it a bit, NVIDIA still very much feels like a hardware and semiconductor company, but it's certainly a very big one. And so the question, of course, is can it keep growing? Is this a buy right now? How should you think about it? Because it drives the market. If NVIDIA is a buy, the market might be a buy, right? Because it's such a big part of the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. Today, it is priced like the market on earnings. So about 21 times forward earnings. And that is roughly like the S&P 500 at large. But the S&P 500 at large doesn't grow 73% a year. So you look at that and that sort of screams, gosh, might this be a buying opportunity? And I think that's where we get some kind of a level of maybe just cognitive dissonance. You're looking at this thing that's kept growing and growing and growing, and everybody's saying, look, four close to $5 trillion value. Could this go to 10? Is that possible? If you look at how it compares to some of the other Mac 7s, Apple is priced at a much higher premium, 29 times forward earnings. Meta is a little lower, but Amazon is also higher. So it looks cheap compared to some of these other big businesses. And so what would have to be true for there to be upside in the business? Well, if they can maintain their margin, and if the hyperscaler capex meets and exceeds the $600 billion this year without major cancellations in the backlog, it seems like there's upside on this stock. Could it go to 200, 225? Possibly.
This is not investment advice.
Well, I think we have that disclaimer baked in now at the intro, don't we?
Yeah.
But we know everybody, like if so many people we know are invested in Nvidia shares, and this is the question they have: is can it keep going up? Should we cash out now? What should we do? So that's the bull case. The bull case is actually just if they do what they said they would do, it feels like there's upside in this one.
Yeah.
The bear case is that the capex decelerates. And we're going to unpack that. If the capex decelerates, if that $1 trillion backlog starts to see cancellations, if the competition in inference from Meta and from Google's homespun and homegrown silicon starts to eat into that inference market share, then you could see a kind of a downturn in the value. So that's really the risk that three of the biggest customers, the big hyperscalers, half the receivables, they are building their own competitors.
Yeah. Interesting. What a fascinating time to be alive.